Hi, I'm Holly Gross, Vice President of Government Relations for the Columbus Chamber. Our chamber is a founding member of OBIS, Ohio Business for Immigration Solutions. OBIS is a coalition of like-minded organizations that are committed to promoting immigration policy reforms that will strengthen our economy, attract and retain global talent, and bring new businesses to the state of Ohio. Immigrants make up nearly 9% of the Columbus metro area and 37% of population growth from 2017 to 2018 came from international migration. I'm personally an immigrant, immigrating from England on an H-1B visa and receiving citizenship status just a few years ago. So this is an issue of personal importance to me. We have a global economy here in Columbus with international reach. Our businesses and educational institutions are working hard to attract and retain top talent. We're a welcoming city. Our policies at all levels of government must reflect our values, must maintain the region's economic competitiveness, and must be responsive to the needs of our employer community. To learn more and get involved in OBIS, I'd encourage you to visit ohcompact.org, which we've linked here in the chat, or you can reach out to your chamber representative to learn more. I'd now like to turn it over to Kelly Fuller, the Chamber's Workforce Development Director, who will moderate today's conversation about the economic disparities faced by new Americans in our community and the solutions for addressing them specific to the business community. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Holly, and welcome to all of you for the first in our four-part series on new Americans in our economy. These educational offerings are made possible through generous support of NiSource Foundation Columbia Gas. It's our goal to introduce and encourage engagement with organizations like Jewish Family Services and Community Refugee and Immigration Services, CRIS, as the connectors to underrepresented talent pipelines that's critical to our business community. Our workforce is only made stronger and more competitive as we build diverse teams. Today, our focus in this kickoff of our series is to discuss some definitions and characteristics of our refugee and immigrant communities in Central Ohio. We will hear some background stories on the refugee journey to the Columbus area and also the financial contributions and economic benefits associated with an often underutilized segment of the workforce. Today, we also invite you to submit questions and engage with our interactive poll during today's presentation. Now, please allow me to welcome Tariq and Tara of Jewish Family Services and CRIS, respectively. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Tariq, let's start with you. Could you share briefly for all of us a little bit about the work that Jewish Family Services does in relation to our refugee and immigrant community and your role there?
Excellent. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me, Kelly. Jewish Family Services is an organization that is 100 years old. It was founded to help the refugees who were arriving at the time from Europe and Europe's wars. Today, obviously, the challenges have expanded to not only refugees and immigrants, but also to the community. We provide education, counseling, job training, and many, many, many things for as well. Our goal, our mission really is also focused on helping those who survived the Nazi persecution. We still have them here in Columbus. It's really in our DNA to make sure that the old refugees and the new refugees alike are served with dignity and respect.
Great.
My role
Yeah.
I had a role there. My role is to help the newly arrived refugees and also immigrants to navigate the workforce and the cultural way of finding a job and finding a footing economically in the United States. And we try to move as many barriers from their path as possible, from either education, supporting them through finding that specific certification, for example, to get that job, or making sure that we can help them find that job that actually is livable and support their families as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Tara, can you share, tell us about Community Refugee and Immigration Services, sometimes referred to as CRIS, and your role with the organization.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Kelly, for the opportunity today. I'm Tara Dungana. I work for Community Refugee and Immigration Services, also called CRIS. CRIS is a local nonprofit. We are a resettlement agency. We pick up families from the airport and help them move up to be a citizen and be a contributing member in the society, in the local Columbus community. And we have a history of, I would say, close to 50 years. It's local here. We do not have operation outside of Columbus as of right now. And within that framework of refugee resettlement and integration, we provide wrap-up services. There are 8-10 different programs within CRIS. One of the program is family reunification. So we have attorneys, immigration attorneys within the system. So and they constantly work every day. Even today, there are so much of a need for the families to have, with their family adjustment, status adjustment, family reunification, stuff like that. And I oversee the program called employability, which is our founder's term, so I have to say it that way. But it's a program that helps newly arrived refugees, newly in the sense that the program can help folks who are less than 5 years in the country, definition by the contract. So we train them with soft skills. Language is a critical component there, and then place them into jobs, meaningful jobs with the community employers, like who all are here in the participation today. And my role is Associate Director of Career Services. Hope I'm saying that right. Thank you.
But the two of you actually are the right people to be on this call, because if the business community in Central Ohio, wants to connect to our refugee and immigrant population in a way that they know that the people that they're trying to hire or promote or move within their organization from this pipeline, that whether they go to Jewish Family Services or CRIS or a combination of the two, the two of you are making those connections between the job seeker and the business community. You're talking about the wraparound services, the supportive services around language and culture. And so you guys are thank you for both being here. You guys are the right people to be on this call to talk to our business community about how to make this connection. I know Holly, shared in her lead-in that, in a period of time, the vast amount of growth in our community comes something like 37% from the refugee and immigrant population. So we know there's growth. I was doing some research in the last few days and just looking at George Mason University. And this study came out in 2018. And in that study, they indicate that at that time, there were close to 166,000 refugees and immigrants living in the Columbus metropolitan statistical area. And that number got larger as you move out into some of the counties and you create a more multi-county reach as well. So I'm going to ask the two of you, where are people coming from? Where in the world are people immigrating and finding refuge here in the United States? What parts of the world?
If I could, I think in the presentation we're going to go through a little bit more deeper, but overall, I think there are two avenues that are foreign-born population coming in. One is, I'm talking about legal ways for now, right? Yeah. So there is the immigrant. I am immigrating either to get a job in the US, or I am going to apply for a student, or I'm a spouse of somebody. So that is the immigration, and that could be anywhere from around the world. There's not a specific places where those individuals are coming from. It's almost a sporadic. The story of refugees, which we'll discover some more, those are America decides, the State Department decides which population is more severe, which population needs more help, which population needs assistance in getting away from harm's way to the U.S. safely. And the Iraq War, the Iraqis and people who served the American army were being brought here. In the late 1990s, it was the Somali community for the Somali Civil War, the Nepali community or the Bhutanese Nepali community in the late 2000s, which Tara, this is how he got here. I myself was Somali, so I came in the late 90s. So you've got this wave of individuals and different times. But what's cool, Kelly, is that we, Jewish Family Services and Chris, are prepared linguistically, culturally, because we know who's coming a year before, and we prepare staffing-wise, culture-wise, and cultural competency. So that's what makes us, why should you work with us, even better.
Right. Right. And we know that, compared to other cities around the country, how does Columbus compare as far as being a welcoming place for refugees?
Tariq, you okay me saying that? Because I was resettled in Columbus in 2009. That's when I came to the country through the refugee resettlement process Tariq just mentioned. And so I would say it's pretty welcoming in the sense of welcoming the community or newer community, because not simply for the sake of saying, and there is data to support, like there are less than 2,000 Bhutanese Nepali families resettled in central Ohio, direct resettlement, okay? Whereas the population has grown over 30,000 right now. And that the differential, whatever it is, 28,000, let us say, it's secondary migration, if that makes sense. People who are resettled in other cities and other states moving into Columbus, right? That tells how welcoming Columbus is in terms of creating that environment. And quickly interjecting my thoughts earlier about Tariq talking refugees and immigrant, right? Immigrant, economic reason why immigrant move or come to US, particularly due to economic reason. Either they are coming to school, make a professional life here, things like that. Refugees, out of no choices. Okay, if that makes a difference there.
That's a good way. Thank you for that, both of you. That is a good way to make that distinction. So, the immigrant is coming as a choice from really anywhere in the world based on, opportunities for job or school, or to join a spouse or a significant other, where from the refugee population, these are folks that, because of limited choice or no choice, have to leave their home and to be resettled in other countries and other cities like Columbus. I'm going to turn it over to you guys now. I know that Tariq's going to be able to share more about the refugee community, especially here in Columbus, and the experience. And we're going to talk at the end of this in more detail at the end of this presentation about the economic impact and what Jewish Family Services and Chris can do for you as a business leader. But please feel free as we're going again to submit questions or responses in the chat, and we'll pose those to Tariq and Tara as we go along.
Kelly, can you see Tara?
Yes.
So again, thank you for having us. And today we're going to basically look at the story of refugees and how people get to the United States. Basically, we're going to look at what makes somebody a refugee, the journey that they take to get to the United States, and of course, and Tara will talk in depth about the U.S. refugee policy and the laws surrounding those. So let's get one thing out of the way. You ask yourself, what's the difference between an immigrant and a refugee? And as Tara pointed out, immigrant is somebody that comes to the U.S., immigrates, as in I come to the United States to get education, get a job, economic reasons. But a refugee is obviously somebody who is being persecuted because of who they are. And then you ask yourself, so what are they being persecuted for, or what is persecution? And it's basically if somebody's chasing you because of your, or wants to harm you because of your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or if you belong to a certain group. So that defines by the Geneva Convention that is what who you are, a refugee, once you've been persecuted because of these few points here. So you ask yourself then, so how many people are in the world are being persecuted and fleeing from conflict? Well, I hate to say to you today, since 2017, 80 million people are being kicked out of their home because of the points that I showed you earlier. So the people that are being kicked out from their home is 80 million. The people who have crossed an international border and went to another country for protection and been registered by the United Nations are 40 million people. And out of that, you're looking at a 47% of those are women, and 51% of those are pretty much children. So the vast majority of the people being harmed because of this huge global problem are children and women. Most people assume that, you know, if you hear from a political point of view in the US narrative and Europe, you would imagine, you would say to yourself, you know, how many people are being brought to the United States? There's too many refugees, too many people, too many things. But if I tell you today, the number one country hosting refugees is not the US, it's Turkey. And the second, Pakistan, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iran. We're not even close. We're not even 0.3% of that. So when a refugee flees their own country, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees sets up camps and protection in the adjacent country or the country next door to support refugees to meet their basic needs. And this is what refugee looks like. This refugee here, this photograph I took in 2016 in the border of Greece and Macedonia. And you would not imagine this is Europe, but this is Europe, and this is where the refugees are being housed. And Tara, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I think just picking up from earlier point you made, there are that 40.8 million people who are refugees, who are registered as refugees, right? So a quick point I want to make there is folks may have, or the families may have displaced from their home country, but may choose not to register as a refugee and live their life in a different way. So that there is that population also, just so that that message is crossed through. Anyway, refugee again, relating to what you are seeing on the picture here, Tariq's picture. I spent that life for last 20 years before coming to the country, and it's pretty much like this. It's like every day you wake up for nothing, right? There is no hope. Like, what do? You are a refugee, and there are different. I think the host country's law also plays some role in refugee life while they are in the refugee camp. Some refugee camps or the host countries who have the refugee camps allow refugee to work, and many others don't allow. In my context, I was not allowed to go out and work as a refugee for those many years. So every day you wake up, you see the same thing. This is how I lived last 20 years, right? And expect some miracle happen in your life, and that miracle happened to me after 20 years. And I'm here today, proud to be the citizen of the country, the only country I can call my home now. So um, yeah, and refugee come here to work. We can talk about that later.
Tara, I just want to ask you a question really quickly about your experience. When you came from, and you were in the refugee camp for 20 years, when you were finally able to come here to the United States, did you come directly to Columbus, or what was your path to getting here to where you are now, living and working in Columbus, Ohio?
Yes, that's a good question, Kelly. Thank you for asking that. For me, it is Columbus. So my flight started from Kathmandu in Nepal to New Delhi in India, and then Brussels in Europe, and to US, New York. So it was like a day and a half to two
Yeah.
on the air, but from Kathmandu to Columbus.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Tara, thank you. And so United States is not unique to resettlement. United States is part of several countries so these are the countries that does strong resettlement. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Netherlands, and the Scandinavian countries, and the United States. From 1981 till 2017, 16, the United States was #1 resettlement country in the world. By far, US was the most generous ever to let refugees come to the United States. These other countries, Canada was #2 sometimes, but mainly they don't do resettlement as the way we welcome people into the United States. If you think our hiring laws are complicated in terms of doing all this paperwork, I hope none of us become refugees, because in order for you to come to the United States, this is what one has to go through. And this is, I think, what Kelly was asking Tara earlier, of why does it take 20 years for someone to come to the United States? And in the last political cycle, I was, someone like Tara and I was hurt by people saying, oh, we let people in, we don't do background checks, we don't do any of that stuff. Not true at all. I went through similar process, and Tara certainly went through this process. So quickly, and we're just going to go through this because it's a lot. Basically, when war happens, you go to a refugee camp. You're being vetted by United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and you are really basically interrogated to make sure that your story checks out, where you come from. They ask you about your land. They ask you about what happened. And your stories has to sort of match with current news and things that are happening. After that, a number of years go by, then the United States, their resettlement program opens up, and the United States does not take the word for UNHCR. They do their own investigation. Department of Homeland Security does background check, fingerprints, retina, interviews, you name it. And then you wait and wait and wait for a number of years till all those things check back. And then you have to go through a drug screening or health screening rather. And someone that has not been to a doctor for 10, 15, 20 years, imagine now you have to go see all these things, and you're healthy enough for the US and you travel. So I'm really summing it up in like 2 seconds, but the idea is imagine the bureaucratic system that all of that you have to wait through. And if one thing goes wrong, you go in the back of the line and you wait for another number of years. Tara, any comment?
Yeah, that's a good point, Tariq. You summarize. I just one thing again, like to quickly interject my experience here with this process you have explained step by step. As we see, these are well designed, well formulated process, right? Refugees have to go through the screening once a family express interest for the third country resettlement. That's where it starts. And to give you a quick insight of this process, as it looks like a process, I got married once my process was halfway through. Okay, and happens, right? Life happens. So my process now has to restart because it became a new case because now there are two adults in the same case. Okay, so I my process bounced back to step two, and then have to go again the similar steps one by one because it's a new case now. So giving that insight of this process, it's like that's how thorough and screening this process is, if that makes sense.
It does, Tara. Thank you. And there are videos that the time is very short. I would love to show you guys, and maybe I'll send Kelly a link so she could share in the future. But here are the numbers. Kelly, you've seen the refugee admission, right?
Right.
You see that screen? Okay, good. So from 2000, I'm not going to read it all, but you could see the numbers go up, down, up, down. So basically the way it happens is agencies, we call them the VOLAGs, or the voluntary agencies, the agencies that does the resettlement will sort of tell Congress or lobby or what have you. The point is that the number of the ceiling of the United States will be 80, but the president and the White House are the only people allowed to give that signature of the number of people being resettled. So from 2008, as you can see, everybody hoped for 80,000 refugees to come in, but the reality is what you're looking at the very far right. So
Kelly is sorry for the quick technical thing there. Can we do not see Tariq's number for 2018-19 because our picture covers that in the chat.
Right.
Is there a way?
There we go. Thank you, Hope and team.
Sorry.
So in we're seeing obviously quite the dramatic change in those numbers over that period of time. Yeah, thank you. How are you? Is this information that both of your organizations constantly? Obviously, you're receiving the information, but do you also advocate for like increases to those numbers or to changes to the admissions process? Is that even possible?
Numbers. Chris would receive it. They do the resettlement. Jewish Family Services, since 2016, we haven't done the resettlement portion of our services. So I think the executive director, Angie, would definitely have this numbers from their affiliates. Right, Tara?
Yeah, we do, but I think answering Kelly's questions about if we do the advocacy or if there is our input towards that number every year. Yes, there is an advocacy that happens every year, and we do give our feedback at the local level. But at the end of the day, it's the presidents who makes that determination for annual number. how many refugees would be allowed to come to the country. And picking up quickly, Tariq mentioned about VOLAX earlier. There are 9 national agencies, mostly faith-based, and we work under one of them. So for us, Chris, our national VOLAG is CWS, Church World Services. Okay, and there are 9 others who closely work with the Homeland, State Department, and other government agencies, and they I think they decide between the government and the VOLAX, like which family can be best served in what city. And there are so many factors into that consideration. We can talk about that another time.
Is this a photo from John Glenn Airport?
Yes, yes. So this grandmother holding her grandson, she hasn't seen him in a number of years, and they're finally meeting. Some of you have grandparents or great grandparents or great great grandparents from Ellis Island. This is the 21st century Ellis Island. So the moment where family greet each other, and first steps in our great city of Columbus, that people are being resettled and come to our state, and child coming into here. And this photo, this is the I'm sure you guys have heard the Muslim ban that happened a number of years ago. This is 2 siblings. They haven't seen each other in 2.5, 3 years because of that law that Syrians or any other Muslim country were not allowed. Chris, thanks to Angie and her team, fought very, very hard to get this family in. Now the moment of that they hold each other is so priceless that I was proud to be there and witness it myself. That's Angie welcoming the family and coming to the United States as a whole. The young man with the hat was the one that couldn't make it, and the ban happened right at the time that he was about to board on the plane, and that's family separation right there. So just to give you a little bit of background. So I'm moving along fast, guys. I'm really sorry. I want to make sure that I get all this information to you. 1975 to current, about 3 million refugees have come. That is really a small amount of people if you consider the U.S. population, and 45% of those were from the Asian countries, and majority of that at the time were the Vietnam War and former Soviet Union, when the Jewish community would be persecuted. That's a lot of those numbers that come from there, and Africa and Europe and Latin America, 4%. So you're looking at Latin America, you're saying to yourself, wait, how does that really happen? They're coming here, you hear the caravan, you hear all of this. The difference is there's an immigrant and there is a refugee. Again, most of the people that are coming from the southern border are not refugees. They're immigrants. They're coming here for economic reasons, although current situations in Honduras and other countries have suggested otherwise. So when refugees arrive, there are army of workers, agencies, volunteers, people who stabilize their lives. It doesn't just happen. There is government support, such as the state of Ohio, and also the Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services does a huge amount of service to support the individuals, at least to get their footing in the first number of months. And agency like Chris and us, Jewish Family Services, are responsible for some of the stuff that you're looking on your screen here. Tara, you want to jump in?
Yeah, it's pretty clear here about the services, wrap-up services, and things that we support the families through. There are so many details inside, like housing is a big issue upfront because we haven't had family arrived yet, but we have to make sure there is a housing available for the family to go in the evening when they arrive from the airport, right? And just think about how many landlords would be welcoming those families because what do you need if you go out to seek for a rent? They ask you for your work history. They ask you for your rental history. They ask you for your social and IDs. And here we're talking about, oh, they are arriving another week, right? But we need to have have the apartment here ready, and so forth and so on. Don't want to get all those details, but yes, we ideally we would like to get ahead of advance notice, like as long as it could be, like if we could get a notice like a month ahead of time that a family is arriving from, let's say, Congo, then we could prepare better, right, to welcome that family and everything. But oftentimes that's not what happens. We get like a week to 2 week advance notice. 2 week is great if we get that, right? And then we have to make all these arrangements. So once the family arrives, we are required by the policy there that there is a staff member, or if not a staff member, or community volunteer who speaks the language of the family arriving, welcoming in the airport, to give them a welcoming experience there, right? And then our staff would pick them up, and she goes to those welcoming site in the airport very often, and there is a staff member. They pick up the family, take them to the designated housing, and the next morning they take them to the local social security office. Right now, it's different in the pandemic time, and then help them apply for their social. That's where it starts. But quick point to make here is refugees, when they arrive to the country, they are work authorized. Okay, so they can go to the work the next day. With the work require authorization part, but there is so much to overcome before they are ready for the work.
I think that's a really important point, and thank you for bringing that forward, Tara, that when the individuals that come here are work authorized from the time they're here. As I'm looking at some of the results of our online interactive poll from the first one, it appears that from the people that responded, 50% of our respondents on the call today have hired from the New American Community in the last 1 to 3 years. So yay, yes, so thank you. So I'm calling that out, I guess, because I'm encouraged by that, but also for those who I know we're going to move into that now, but those who haven't participated yet, or it maybe has been a while, share with us more about what you're about to, the work that you do, and how our businesses can benefit from the connections to both CRIS and Jewish Family Services.
Kelly, while thinking about that question you threw out there, the previous slide, the employment and ESOL services, although it's just a bullet point there, the amount of work that goes into it, it's monumental. There's huge amount of staff with diverse backgrounds. We have a PhD ESOL teachers to certified professional certified resume writers in our agencies that really support this individual who just arrived in the United States, who does not have an American work history. Is we focus on transferable skills. I showed you some pictures of people, in the refugee camps. They didn't sit around and do nothing. They worked in a small little businesses. They've created their own economy. They have done that. So those skills that they've gained over there is extremely useful in the United States. And we show them and we teach them, both Jewish Family Services and CRIS, we make sure that they understand how to sell their skills into these employers that are with us today. So this is an important point, and also we make sure that the companies who partner with us, also we learn the skills that they need, so we can target the individuals who have them. So it's really a match-making process here.
And I think, if I recall from my prior life when I was working in adult education at a career center where we offered ESOL classes, that there were businesses that actually had those classes offered often on site at the work site out of convenience. So, I think the work that both Jewish Family Services and Chris does to accommodate the business community really speaks a lot to that ability to partner, right? That ability to partner to help the business community find the talent that they need and to support the individuals to help them with the culture and the language skills. So I think that work, I love to hear about those stories because I think that really serves both sides well, the worker and the workplace.
Sure.
Absolutely. So if I could move us along here, one of the most amazing times that almost every business we partnered with and we worked with, both Tara and I, this is the kind of services we deliver. So let me emphasize what Tara said earlier, and I think Kelly pointed out, refugees are the best immigrant community that you can hire from when it comes to paperwork. They don't require visas, sponsorships, they don't require anything. A refugee in the United States has legal rights as much as a US citizen. The only difference, they can't vote. That is a fact, and they will have something called either an I-94 or a green card, and they'll have, depends how long they've been in the US, but if they've been here more than 6 months, they'll definitely have their social, and that is as legal as they can get. We can also,
and Tariq, do you want to say that the employer's partner would get our support through this process? We're not just introducing folks to you. Here is a person who wants to work for you, take it. No, we are there all through the process, supporting you, the employer, in all these steps mentioned here: onboarding, interviewing, orientation. If there are language help that we can provide beyond the orientation, we are here. And up until now, all those services are free, right? So, and again, like there's few more things like Tariq mentioned earlier about the refugees are as clean as citizen in terms of ID requirement and things like that to go to work. But another thing to I think highlight is no background, meaning like employer get their, when they run their background check, they get that within an hour to two, like, because there is no background, everything is clean, right? Otherwise they would not be in the country. And we haven't seen our clients. Tariq has more experience than I do. I'm doing this job since 2010. We haven't seen our clients fail the drug test in the process. So, yeah.
No, that's great, and that extreme vetting that you're talking about, kind of, gives that added advantage. I did just receive a question, if I may, because I think that this, when we're talking about why businesses should work with Chris and Jewish Family Services, I think this is one of the things you can address. What are some of the, beyond the ESOL, what are some of the biggest challenges of refugees and immigrants with respect to education? Whether that's continuing education for themselves or just education in general for their families, biggest challenges for refugees?
So 20 years in refugee camp with the country that they were born in and started their education collapsed, the system has collapsed, and they lived in refugee camps for 20 years. Now the person is in their late 20s, mid 30s, probably has a young family. Do I support that family, or do I start from scratch to go back to school and do that? And economically, that will not it's impossible for them to quit their job and go back to school. Some do and have family support from various reasons, but most refugees, they got to the US, especially if they have young children, for their children, to save their children. They just like your great grandparents, they left Europe to come here to make sure that you have a better life. It is the same historic same reasons. But of course, Kelly, there are differences. There is for example, countries who have recently collapsed, such as, like, let's say Iraq, for example. The education system was still then the war happened, and most of them got out quicker than the Somalis or the Congolese or the Nepalis, right? So their education, they may not speak English, but the foundation of education was still sound. When they came to the US, it's a matter of switching from Arabic to English, and then they can move forward immediately. So really it depends on who. And some also Bhutanese Nepalis have lived in other countries, or they were urban refugees and they've gone to school. So not all refugees cannot read and write. It is what country, what time, when, where, all that depends of the situation.
No, thank you for that. I know you and Tara and I had talked about that not too long ago about, as you just mentioned, depending on, when kind of the collapse of a country's infrastructure happened, and, where those people were in their own education, lives at that point, in their home countries. Really quickly too, from the same questioner, I do want to put this out there. Would you be willing to share this presentation? Or could we connect you to the questioner afterwards, Tariq, to share your presentation with that individual?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, we'll make sure that we do that. Thank you.
If you hire refugees, I will.
Okay. You drive a hard bargain, Tariq.
Please take it back.
I'm joking, guys. All right. So again, we're going to open it for questions, and we want all of us to really ask the questions. I want this to be a lecture, as I was telling Kelly earlier. Purchasing power, 35.9 million. This is only in Columbus, and the amount of contribution refugees make is $1.6 billion into our economy. So you're looking at a huge amount of untapped workforce, and one of the things about refugees for the past 19 years or 20 years I worked with, and Tara's been working with refugees for as long as he can remember, it's really the loyalty of it, right? So you've got someone that starts for your company, stays with you, and the retention is amazing. And also some of the cultural things that Americans will do, refugees may not do, such as Thanksgiving. When I first came to the US, I was like, I don't know what Thanksgiving is, but I want to, if I'm going to get paid time and a half, I'm going to work forever. So those are the kind of amazing things about refugees. Vast majority, I'm going to put it as even as high up as the 90s. They all yearn to become U.S. citizens. They really, and they are the only group of refugees have the legal right to become U.S. citizen. Straightforward. If there's no crime has been committed or any other issues, they are legally obliged to apply for the U.S. citizenship, and they do so. And I would encourage you to go for naturalization ceremony if you really want to learn how powerful and how amazing that is. And we could share that with you guys. I'll share that with Kelly if you ever want to join after the pandemic, of course.
Of course. Please do. And so just to reiterate a point you made earlier, the individuals that are coming here as refugees through this extreme vetting, they're work ready day one, but they're not U.S. citizens yet, but they're working towards that. You said, into the 90% of people who, as well as learning a new language, learning new culture, perhaps learning a new language and new culture and acclimating to a different environment, they're also working, going to school, and striving, for that opportunity to become U.S. citizens as well.
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, Kelly, the only country that gave me that opportunity to vote, to participate, to have a voice in is this country. So almost all refugees recognize America gave us the opportunity to really build it and build ourselves along with it. And also gave us the opportunity to support those who we left behind, and to help them financially sometimes as well. So extended family members who are in tough situations. So America is giving us that opportunity, and it's us that we have to also give back and build it as well. As this Genius has done as well.
Thank you both. We're getting some great questions, if I may pose those to you. And thank you. I do want to mention that the photographs are work of art, and they're amazing. So thank you for sharing your art and the stories of the refugees that you both represent. We're getting a question from one of our participants. Outside of jobs and employment, what else can people do, businesses that are on the call today, to support JFS, Chris, and the populations that you serve?
I can jump in if Tara would allow me. And I think two types of support refugees need. There are financial support. So agencies like Jewish Family Services and Chris are nonprofits, and the amount of funding it takes to support refugees is monumental. And any person in poverty to support that initiative is very expensive and very costly. Second is, what talents do you have? Can you mentor a child? Can you help a family? Can you pick up an elder? And this is all after pandemic, hopefully, right? So all those things, it really is, it goes very far. So financial, time, and also hiring refugees, really deliberately going out and seeking out to Tara and I and saying, I want to hire people. That's the best way you can do it as well.
Sure. Refugees want to do business. So any guidance in that would be helpful. All refugees have to obtain the driver license at some point of time. They need that training, right? The actual driver license training. Another thing you can do is host a refugee family. There are families in Columbus. There are churches who have hosted refugee families. So meaning refugee family arrives to Chris, and then they start working with the family with their needs and support and everything. So there is so much can be done. You can be an English language partner for the families, right? With naturalization, that's another opportunity, because every refugees have to go through that process, and there is that drive. Refugees want to be citizen because that's the thing they have missed in the past, right? So there are so many opportunities to get involved.
Thank you for that. So it sounds like, the time, talent, and treasure, right? Whether it's your time to mentor or sponsor or to work, individually with families and others in the community, the donation opportunity. I think on both of your websites, there's a button, there's a way to donate to help support the work that you're doing. And also, your talents, if you have talents in certain things, that could help a refugee family or an individual learn, integrate. If it's a teaching talent, ESOL, I have such admiration for ESOL teachers and the work that they're doing.
There is any opportunity, sorry.
No, go ahead, Tara.
Just giving quick example, like when there is this voting time, right? We get that call from the community, like, how can I help? So often people come and drive people to the pool because there is that ride help needed, right? And help them go vote. So that endless opportunities.
Another question that came out that is something that we hear about a lot at the Chamber as, an organization representative of business. Talk about the additional hurdles that refugees and immigrants, but specifically refugees in this conversation face when they're trying to transition a chosen profession from their country of birth. So if it's something like I was an attorney, a doctor, something that required advanced training and education, what does that process look like when I come here and try to find footing in that same role? What do I do? And how can businesses kind of be involved and support that work?
Kelly, Kelly. I think we have to sort of unpack it a little bit, right? So let's say an engineer in Burkina Faso in West Africa, right? Worked with all these companies, built buildings. When they come to the US, there are two ways one can get back into their field. One is time. Do they have the time to go back to school for as many years as a young person in the US gone through school, right? All this OSU, graduate, go into this and get the certificates and so forth. And the other way is, let's say the company hired, let's say an American company gave this person a chance and figure out a way to translate his certification into the American system. There are cultural differences in the way Burkina Faso does this and the United States does that. Also, there is a cultural gap even in the workplace that some employers cannot relate to the person they may have the certificate, but in terms of their accent or can they work in the US? Can they understand the American? Believe me, American pop culture in a job interview, sometimes that alone can kick you off from a job interview. Even knowing what's out there in American way of American slang, American culture of saying those things, those simple things can look at the interviewer, can look at the interviewee differently and say, well, I'm familiar with this person who knows all these things, plus has a certificate. So I would argue that the reason why someone like me and Tara are very good at negotiating those cultural clues and cultural norms as we teach in our courses is how do you pass an American interview? American interviews are more of a bragging way about yourself. In some cultures, you brag, you lose the interview. So when do you put the hat, when do you take the American hat on, when you take the Burkina Faso hat? It's very complicated and culturally daunting, right? So before I would imagine that one looks at person's certificate, is what Tara and I do is orient you into the American culture and understand the American way of really negotiating your ability to sit down in a job interview. I think that's, to me, is first, and certificates are second. Some people think certificates is first, but I honestly, I would argue that American culture and American way of explaining yourself from the American lens sometimes can get you very far. And job survivability too. Once you get the job, Americans do certain things differently. There is separation of your personal life, your professional life. There is some cultures, everything is me. I can share with you about my personal life as much as my culture or my religion. You know, in for example, Somali culture and Arabic culture, the way we speak is all about religion quotes and religion things. And if you translate it to an American, people will be like, whoa, this person is, I don't think I feel comfortable about bringing God into every single sentence, right? So
Yeah. So Kelly, quickly, just adding what Tariq mentioned, there are professional folks who come with the professional background from before, right, through the refugee process. So and those folks, again, age is a factor on top of everything we discussed, right? Now, do they have the energy, I would say, like to go back to school and get recertified and again go back to profession, right? So that's what we see. So this is the argument we make. First of all, we be very intentional as at our level to place people into sort of foot into the door. So you are a physician, let's hypothetically say, before coming to the country. So what we do is like, okay, I know you want to be a physician here and practice that, but there is a process here, right? So let's get you into a similar job in a hospital system, and you just move up from there, right? That way you have the opportunity to be in the industry. And Tariq and I are very, very strong advocate of apprentice program. internship programs, because they give these folks a real life opportunity to learn about this new culture, new job culture, and translate their skill there in the job. If that makes sense.
No, it does. Thank you for that. Yeah, if I can't come and practice as a physician because that's not recognized here, at least, you're working hard to get me an opportunity within the medical system somewhere so that I can at least continue in my, in my line of work. I do want to ask you, this is a topic for me that I think, I hear a lot too from businesses around, kind of the cultural competencies and cultural kind of, conversations within organizations. And, Tariq, you hit the nail on the head right there. In that interview process, something is, and I don't want to say simple as, but something as different as a culture that we look at the interview from an American perspective of this is our time to give ourselves permission to brag about how well we do, where in some cultures that's not really part of how people present. What can businesses do either during that interview process or even when they're posting positions during that whole piece? What can businesses and talent and acquisition folks do differently or better to encourage and support hiring refugees and immigrants?
Well, if I could, right? So attending this space, at least that's a start for you to at least understand or want to begin to expand their view about, wait, so you're right. Some of them are very fidget, very nervous, and interviews are by far nerve-wracking.
For sure.
So if you're hiring a refugee who coming to the US was a matter of a stroke of a pen. So their entire life, they waited for 20 years and they're sitting in front of an American and that American's listening to their story. And that American decides if they can live in the refugee camp for the rest of their lives or they can come to the US. That person holds your life. That same mentality is in this interview. So the person may completely shut down and not really know how to engage, which you and I, Kelly, in a job interview, first, light humor, second, weather, third, we know the routine, right? We know exactly, talk slightly about the company and what you've learned, and we go on to the more serious things. But if you have no idea how to even say those things, it's a completely shut down. So what we do is we teach, Tara and I, we have certified, again, like I said, people who are linguistically extremely in a PhD level of understanding, that. And also from an experience, Tara and I, we go through all the baggages that we've gone through, all these interviews in the US, and we teach those courses and we make sure that the people, can understand that. But as a company, one has to look at the skill set that you need. So for example, if it's a very entry-level job, let's talk about directly of, could they physically lift this? So an open-ended questions. But if you say, tell me about, a scenario, what would you do if this happens and this happens? The refugee, not only linguistically, but also a storytelling component, may not be able to go through that. That doesn't mean they're not able to do the job, right? So it's really more conversation with people like us, practitioners who have been doing this for a long time, both culturally and that can negotiate both ways. I think that is, I hate to say we are the key to solving those little bit of misunderstandings.
No, I appreciate that. And I think, that's a key takeaway today, hopefully for the folks that are on our call and our conversation, is that when we want to talk about actionable items, to make some changes to hiring processes, whether it's moving to, more closed-ended questions that are specific to a job versus asking someone to respond in an open-ended, more narrative way. These are things that you both can do with businesses, is to help them understand, review and evaluate your hiring process when it comes to the refugee community, and how can you ask things differently, how can you onboard differently so that it can be successful for the business as well as the job seeker.
And if I could add I think one thing also is challenging to many companies that Tara and I, or many business partners that Tara and I visit or talk to, it is the generic application process and online testing. So in the past, if somebody is doing a very basic entry-level distribution center, and the questions about are sort of a behavioral-based questions, right? So would you, if you see somebody who steals, what would you do? And click yes, no, and it's like 50 questions, 100 questions. That really deters. I hope the company or the hiring process needs to revisit it about who's coming to the US, who are the untapped workforce, how can we do that? Because although they do understand the actual question, cultural competency doesn't kick in. Like they don't, why would I steal? Of course I'm gonna tell somebody, what, is there a right question? Is it a wrong? And the time runs out, right? By them even thinking about it because they don't know how to do that. That doesn't mean we don't teach them. That doesn't mean we don't mitigate all those things that we teach in our courses. You know, this is what Americans behavioral-based question means. It's not like you stole something. Nobody's accusing you for anything. It's just that, what would you do in these scenarios? So I think it's time to revisit the consultants who create these questions to companies, and hopefully that we can also have an input.
I would like to add, like, sit down with an open mind when you are sitting at the time of interviewing folks, right? Because and this could be like idealistic way of saying, because I know for such big employers who have to hire thousands of people in a month time when season picks up, right? How can you just get that through quickly? But if you really want to know the person, I think you want to sit down with an open mind, like thinking out of the pot, kind of you beyond your structure of the interviewing thing. That way, people feel more comfortable and express and open up and start sharing, feel comfortable sharing that you want to know from them.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. Thank you. And hopefully, you know, our businesses and to your point too, you know, Tariq, some of the organizations that create the testing forms or the, you know, the application systems themselves can, you know, revisit, and maybe businesses can help influence that with, you know, their vendors and their providers as to what they're looking for. I want to ask you guys to, based on your what you're observing today, and I know we're in a very, you know, a very strange time, we all know, you know, during the pandemic and during, you know, much social unrest around the world and here and this country too. Where are you anticipating, where are you seeing new refugees coming from? I mean, we talk about, you know, we know where things are happening around the world, and we talked about Somali population, and when the Soviet bloc broke open, a lot of those folks, and the Poly-Bhutanese community. Where do you think the next wave of people coming to Columbus will come from?
If I can jump in here, that's $1 million question, Kelly. I asked that to our director and folks, and they asked to our national BOLAG, and they asked to the State Department. I think for now it's like everybody wants to rebuild that program, right? Because whatever happened in the past few years. So, but if this helps answer, we have seen 3 to 4 Colombian family in recent months.
Okay.
From Colombia.
From Colombia.
Yeah. So, and our director, Angela Plummer, and again, like there is no data to support. This is like our anticipation is also maybe we just see from the Latin American countries the first wave of people, because I think with the proximity and again like the way the refugee screening process is, that could be the population that may come through quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say for the past 4 years, both Tara and I have seen a huge. So if you look at, let's go backwards. And forward is very hard to predict at the moment, but backwards it's the Great Lakes of Africa. So you're looking at Uganda, a few people from there, and Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and majority of those people either speak Swahili or the Rwandese language of Kinyarwanda. So and both of our staff we have professionals who speak those languages that have helped us troubleshoot a lot of the cultural things. Again, Tara and I are American citizens, lived here, professionals, but our background is both refugees. We do have the same historic, but that doesn't mean that I culturally understand as somebody from Rwanda, right? I may have the same experience of running away from my country and coming here. We don't claim, we're not going to say, but we do. There's a significant amount of connections of running, coming to the US, finding my footing, understanding the culture. We do have that, but we do have staff. The agency deliberately hires people, and Tara and I both hire people from that. But we don't just hire people because they speak the language. We hire them because they're professionals, both American and both in their own country as well. And therefore, they can bridge that gap between when a company needs somebody to support them, troubleshoot a situation, hire more people, recruit more people, then we can tap into those are staff members and folks.
Yeah, that's important. We're getting towards the last 10 minutes or so of our conversation, and I just continue to watch for questions to come in from those who are on our call. But Tara and Tariq, things that we haven't talked about yet today, and this is the kickoff of a 4-part series, so we'll dive even more deeply into some of these topics as we move through the year. But as we're talking today about the refugee community specifically, and the stories and the journey and how people get here and the impact to the business community, what have we not shared this morning yet with with those calling in the business community that you would like them to know when it comes to connecting who the refugees are in Columbus and the economic impact and the workforce impact of this talent pipeline?
There are some oops, am I reflecting too much? You guys hearing okay? Okay. There are some barriers we haven't talked today, right? Maybe we can talk about that in the other time. But there are barriers, like transportation is a big barrier upfront, right? So and we always constantly look for opportunities and resources to overcome those barriers, and we can share that another time. But I think that's one thing that we did not discuss today.
Right. So as businesses are thinking about hiring for the first time for the refugee community, or continuing the work that they're already doing, we know that transportation can be a barrier, like it is for so many others as well. And we'll talk more at another session about what businesses can do, but at least understand that is also a barrier. Tariq, were you going to share something as well?
Well, transportation has been or is, and not only for refugees and immigrants, but for the entire. If you're a new company that is moving, outside the belt of Columbus, you really are having a hard time recruiting people, getting people to you, and of course the economy as well. The way, if we get off the pandemic and move towards recovery, we have limited number of people to hire. If we are creative about how we bring people to those locations from the central side of Columbus, then that's going to be a challenge for that company to recruit, for that business to stay above that. So that is one area that we can solve, and hopefully, I hate to be that commercial guy, stay tuned, but those are the kind of discussions that we can have about how we solved at least 2 companies really were struggling to recruit and how they really moved up, and now they no longer need people to hire. So that tells you that we could solve that problem as well. The other thing I was going to add also is things that we haven't recovered really is the troubleshooting culturally inside. Once you hire refugees and immigrants, everybody, people that are foreign-born population, how do you retain? How do you keep the energy? How do you make them inclusive? How do you move the individual who shines from that community to leadership position? All those things will create a longer retention for you as a business. And those are the kind of discussions that we can have, as well as how to mentor people, and also, troubleshoot and for them to participate in the company instead of just clocking in and clocking out. What does the company do? Is there activities that you do with your population that you want new Americans to or refugees to take advantage of? And we can help you with that as well.
That's great, and thank you. That's that is a good commercial for our next offering in Q2, when we do dive more deeply into the actual mechanics of hiring and solving some of those barriers, and that whole very important retention piece. And retention is an issue regardless of what talent pipeline you are working with, but obviously we know from the refugee community there are organizations like CRIS and Jewish Family Services that can help with those wraparound supportive services that help people get jobs and stay in the jobs, so that it's better for the worker and certainly for the business community. Well, I would, yeah.
Can I make a quick point? Again, Tariq told me earlier not to brag about ourselves much of the culture, but here I am. Between Tariq, Jewish Family Services, and CRIS, we move around 500, 600 people every year from these soft skills trainings, all we mentioned earlier, to self-sufficiency, employment. So as small as we are, but pretty impactful in those communities. Okay, so what I'm saying with that is like, again, early on I mentioned about that, like we work between Tariq and I, again, we work closely with over 80 community employers, Central Ohio and beyond that. Past Monday, I was in Hillsboro, Ohio with the employer meeting. So we have that resources. Why do we go to Ashland, to Hillsboro, to Washington Courthouse when there are employer partners here who desperately need people every day, right? So let's work out in our neighborhood parts before we have to go outside of Columbus, right? So there's so much we can do together.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. So even though you're able to go to Hillsboro and Washington Courthouse, there's still a lot of opportunity here in the Columbus market to connect to businesses here as well, and to help move people that are refugees living in this area, into jobs that are closer to them too. I want to thank you both for bringing your stories and your experience and your ideas to the conversation. As I mentioned, this is the first of 4 throughout the year, but I want to reiterate to those on the call, the contact information for both Tara and Tariq is available. Those who inquired about the presentation, we'll make sure that you have Tariq's contact information so you can reach out directly to him at Jewish Family Services. I want to thank all of you for your participation with the questions and the interactive poll. A special thank you to NiSource Foundation and Columbia Gas for their continued support of our work. Come back and see us as the months go forward, as we continue talking about refugees and immigrants in the Columbus market, and visit the Chamber events page as well. We have a lot going on in the next month or so at the Chamber to help you connect and grow your business. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Be well. We'll talk soon.